forward. So we are going to continue on in the teacher's manual, beginning at section 7, should healing be repeated? Just to remind you, we're going through a series of questions in the teacher's manual. And so we handled some aspects of healing yesterday in yesterday's session, which was posted on YouTube. How is it accomplished and is it certain? People said that they got a great deal out of that. Today we'll look at two sections. How can healing be, should it be repeated? And about the perception of order of difficulties, how can that be avoided? So I think you will find many people have said that they are finding these sections in the teacher's manual to be very impactful, to be speaking right to their soul and rich. I think you will find that is also true of tonight's material. And I want to thank David for being our reader. Whenever you're ready, David.
Should healing be repeated? This question really answers itself. Healing cannot be repeated. If the patient is healed, what remains to heal him from? And if the healing is certain, as we have already said it is, what is there to repeat? For a teacher of God to remain concerned about the result of healing is to limit the healing. It is now the teacher of God himself whose mind needs to be healed. And it is this he must facilitate. He is now the patient, and he must so regard himself. He has made a mistake and must be willing to change his mind about it. He lacked the trust that makes forgiving truly, and so he has not received the benefit of his gift.
I realize there's a bit of preface that is in order here that comes from the previous section, should healing be repeated, which says that once a teacher of God has united with someone for the purposes of healing, they should trust that the healing has occurred, even if the manifestation to your eyes has not yet appeared. But we should trust that the Holy Spirit got the message and that the healing has occurred, and there's no need to go back and say, hey, I'm not sure, Holy Spirit, you got that. Let's try this again. That would be a lapse in faith of the teacher of God and introducing doubt. And so it refers to that right here. For if the teacher of God remains concerned about the result of healing, they're limiting the healing. And it's now the teacher of God himself who needs to change his mind. So I would refer you back to those previous sections if you have not seen them, or to watch the video. Join with the person in healing, trust the Holy Spirit, got the message, and remain faithful is the guidance that is given to us here. So healing cannot be repeated. If the patient is healed, then what remains for them to be healed from? And we should also say that healing has to do with the state of one's mind, with one's thoughts, one's beliefs, one's self-concept. It has nothing to do with the body, as was said in the previous sections that we read. Susie had a comment?
This immediately takes me back to Saturday, where after I listened to the video, it was about judging what the results in our minds think they should be. I mean, this is really, and I know I've done it. Oh, that person's not healed the way I think he should be, so I'm going to go in there for seconds, you know? And so this is just, I don't know if anybody else that was on Saturday gets this feeling, but it's like so in my face, like helpful. And then to say, oh, I need some healing if in that space of judgment that that person isn't healing correctly, i.e. the ego. Anyway, this was great. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, a great deal of the comments point back to the teacher when doubt enters the mind of the so-called teacher of God, because we know there's not really a difference between anyone here. But the person who's in the right mind, many of the sections point back to the minute doubt enters into that person's mind, your sole responsibility is to accept the atonement for yourself. You can only be helpful to another when you're in your right mind. And so when doubt enters, fear, it has sponsored doubt, and therefore it's necessary that the teacher be the one that restore himself to his right mind. So yes, this is a tightly integrated system of thought. One section is entirely consistent with the next, and we will find that to be true throughout this evening's reading. We'll go on, David.
Whenever a teacher of God has tried to be a channel for healing, he has succeeded. Should he be tempted to doubt this, he should not repeat his previous effort. That was already maximal because the Holy Spirit so accepted it and so used it. Now the teacher of God has only one course to follow. He must use his reason to tell himself that he has given the problem to one who cannot fail, and must recognize that his own uncertainty is not love, but fear, and therefore hate. His position has thus become untenable, for he is offering hate to one to whom he offered love. This is impossible. Having offered love, only love can be received.
Mm-hmm. So there's like many elements within the course. There is this spectrum where, and here we're talking about healing, where the teacher of God knows that the healing was maximal. I take that to be complete. Everything needed was given. It was a divine gift by the Holy Spirit. It's not a partial gift. It's complete. It's maximal. And on the other end of that spectrum is the way the ego views those things. And Susie just referred to it. Oh, I think I need to do it again. We didn't get it completely the first time. Or my eyes are not seeing the manifestation of the healing. Therefore, I'm beginning to doubt whether or not it happened. So I'm going to repeat it again. So from that state of doubt on one end to the trust that the healing was maximal on the other end. And remember, it's not you or I that is doing the healing. The Holy Spirit has so accepted it and so used that occasion for maximal healing. And any deviation from that, lack of faith, lack of trust in the Holy Spirit's healing, now the teacher of God is the one who must reason to himself that And so this is the way you work yourself out of the confusion. You must reason to yourself that you have given the problem to the one who cannot fail, to the Holy Spirit, and then recognize that your own uncertainty is but a manifestation of fear. I need to correct the error in my mind. And the willingness to admit that you're in a mistaken state of mind, wrong-mindedness, is vital to unwinding those things. And as many of us have found, the sooner you do it, the easier it is. Comments? How are we doing with that? Jane, go ahead.
Well, I try to remember what the Course says about if we see that person is ill, we are in separation. And so the minute we see that, then we get into specifics again, which in the beginning isn't harmful. And however, the Course says in our evolution of it, that we have to eventually let go of the specifics in order for the healing or the atonement to be received. So I try to remember that I'm not separate from that person. I'm only separate if I'm looking from up above the battleground and seeing him below, still under the battleground. So that's what I really try to remember, because the healing isn't of the body anyway. And the ego's going to get in there and tell us it's of the body, but it's not of the body. It's totally of the mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, we'll go on. David?
It is in this that the teacher of God must trust. This is what is really meant by the statement that the one responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. The teacher of God is a miracle worker because he gives the gifts he has received, yet he must first accept them. He need do no more, nor is there more that he could do. By accepting healing, he can give it. If he doubts this, let him remember who gave the gift and who received it. Thus is his doubt corrected. He thought the gifts of God could be withdrawn. That was a mistake, but hardly one to stay with. And so the teacher of God can only recognize it for what it is and let it be corrected for him.
And so the teacher of God can only recognize a mistake in his own mind for what it is, not to feel guilty. I just made a mistake, and now I'm willing to have it corrected. It's as simple as that. It doesn't have to be full of drama. As a matter of fact, I've learned to laugh at these things when I catch myself there. Oh, there I go again. I got fooled. And it seems the laughter dissipates all that energy where I start to question myself and wonder, well, what am I doing? Why did I make that mistake? All that dialogue that could attend the recognition of a mistake just gets short-circuited when I laugh and just recognize it's a simple mistake. So we're talking about functioning as a teacher of God in a healing situation with another person. Again, trust is the foundation. So this refers to, in the previous paragraph, it says, having offered love, only love can be received. It is this that the teacher of God must trust. That love was offered and only love is received. So there's a subtlety here that is around the idea of accepting the atonement for oneself. And there seems to me to be, as we unwind the barriers in our mind, levels to it where first I might say the words, but not really experience the oneness. But I'm saying the word. Many times the workbook lessons are like this. I'm saying the words, but there's still a big gap between the words I'm saying and the way I'm feeling. And so accepting the acceptance of the atonement is to accept oneness with creation, to recognize no illusions as standing between you and I and everyone else and the creator, no barriers, oneness. And that's a profoundly deep, all-encompassing spiritual state. And so I would submit that most of the time we're not truly accepting the atonement, even though intellectually we may acknowledge, yeah, the atonement, right, good, yeah, I'm a cheerleader for the atonement, but sometimes at a superficial level. And so first, the teacher of God must accept the atonement for himself, accept the gifts, and then all the gifts of healing that come along with the atonement follow naturally from the acceptance. Another way of saying, by accepting the union of the creator and all creation, then all the gifts that come with that are just, of course, those are just effects. So look at all the times it says accepting here. By accepting healing, only by accepting it, can he give it. If he's got doubts, well, then this doubts need to be corrected. Yes, need to be corrected. And that's a mistake, and it's just a simple mistake. Learn to correct. Comments? Go on. David?
One of the most difficult temptations to recognize is that to doubt a healing because of the appearance of continuing symptoms is a mistake in the form of lack of trust. As such, it is an attack. Usually, it seems to be just the opposite. It does appear unreasonable at first to be told that continued concern is attack. It has all the appearances of love. Yet love without trust is impossible, and doubt and trust cannot coexist. And hate must be the opposite of love, regardless of the form it takes. Doubt not the gift, and it is impossible to doubt its result. This is the certainty that gives God's teachers the power to be miracle workers, for they have put their trust in him.
Listen well, my friends, to these words. So, first of all, let's acknowledge one of the most difficult temptation is to recognize, to start doubting the healing just because the symptoms haven't appeared. And there was an exchange we had in a class several months ago where a loving mother was praying for one of her children and was beginning to doubt whether or not the healing is received. And so it shows up a lot of times, especially for people that you're in a long-term or family relationship or other relationship, and you're still seeing the old signs, even though you've given the person into the hands of the Holy Spirit. Realize the issue is not with them. It's with the one who's doing the doubting. And then even though it has the appearance of love, it's a lack of trust that the Holy Spirit got the message And love without trust is impossible. Doubt and trust cannot coexist. I really feel this spectrum from doubt on one end to trust and certainty on the other end. That spectrum and your progression in it is one of the most vital, can I call it attributes, characteristics of God's teacher that anyone will ever encounter. Because we all start out doubting and uncertain and lack of hope and unfaithful, and progress through to the point where at the higher end, the one teacher of God attains a state of mind known as certainty. And this gives you power to be a miracle worker. Why? Because your trust is well grounded in spirit and does not waver. Certainty, trust, faithfulness, lack of doubt. And when we do fall into doubt, we learn to correct the mistake. Susie?
What's really landing for me, and even on a personal note, is this sentence that the one responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. And I just love what you said, how, we say we do, but there's the art and the science. And, something Jane said before, how we start off a certain way, but then we start getting into all the specifics of what's wrong, and our ego takes over, and then the separation occurs. And it's just dawning on me, right, that when I fall into these traps, I have not really accepted the atonement for myself. And that is really a miracle, an aha moment, a change in my thinking, and like a whoa. So that's what it really is. And really, it brings the responsibility again back 100% to myself. So I don't know, to just keep getting better and better and better, Jonica, every day. But that's really helpful for me.
Yeah, this is the very core of the whole separation phenomena that you're referring to, Susie, is the whole separation, to use the words in chapter 31 of the textbook, is a desire to be a self that you are not. You were created as a part of God's loving creation at one with all things, and a desire not to be part of that is the separation, to get away from the atonement. Matter of fact, we're going to read about that tonight, to get as far away from the truth and atonement as you can. That's what the separation is. So A Course in Miracles is a bottoms-up spirituality. We've got to clear out all this confusion and misunderstanding and fear. And when we clear all that out, there is nothing in the way between our minds and receiving perfect love. And so this leads us into the next slide, the next paragraph. So we're going to do a deeper dive on this phenomena of doubt. And the reason for that is not to rub your face in it, but it's to help you recognize when it crops up in your mind, so it doesn't continue on as supposedly as a normal state of mind, but you recognize it quickly as your own doubting, and you say, okay, there's a mistake. So I need healing here. I recognize the need for my healing. So we did say this is, in the context here, is doubting the gift of healing has been given. And if you don't doubt the gift, it's impossible to doubt its result. And then we get into, I really think this is amazing psychology, what David's about to read.
The real basis for doubt about the outcome of any problem that has been given to God's teacher for resolution is always self-doubt. And that necessarily implies that trust has been placed in an illusory self, for only such a self can be doubted. This illusion can take many forms. Perhaps there is a fear of weakness and vulnerability. Perhaps there is a fear of failure and shame associated with a sense of inadequacy. Perhaps there is a guilty embarrassment stemming from false humility. The form of the mistake is not important. What is important is only the recognition of a mistake as a mistake.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so let's spend some moments on here. It's really, on the surface, it may appear, well, I prayed for this person that I care for their healing, and I'm not seeing their healing. I'm beginning to doubt what I see externally. So that's surface level one. But what really is going on is a form of self-doubt. The problem isn't in the other person. The problem is that I'm beginning to wonder about the power of healing, beginning to lose trust in Holy Spirit's healing, and instead trust my physical eyes to judge the progress of another person. Okay. So this is this now clearly it's the one who's doing the perceiving is the one that's confused. These illusions do take many forms, of which they've read a few of them here. Here's the key to saving you time. When you catch yourself in these moments, and they will happen, is not to become preoccupied with, as Jane said, with the specifics of the form. Oh, she said this, and then I said that, and I could have said the other thing, but instead and going through replaying all those details and analyzing how you could have done better. The form of this mistake is not important. It's not worthy of a long narrative. What's important is you recognize the mistake as a mistake and then move into the healing phase, and as quickly as possible. And that habit repeated every day, I'm assuming every day of your life you make a mistake in thought of some sort. So you repeat it every day, if not multiple times a day, which is to recognize that a mistake has been made and then to go through the correction process with the Holy Spirit. So all this that seems to be on the surface about somebody else comes back to the individual who is doing the perceiving is the one who has lost trust in the gifts of God. And that I find that to be very powerful. In every situation, there is a lesson God would have us learn. Even when it seems to be about other people we may not know. We may not even know their names. Joy, you had your hand up?
Yeah, just this thought is occurring to me that if I'm looking out there through these physical eyes and I'm seeing anything, if I'm looking at another person and I'm seeing anything less than the perfect child of God, that's the indication right there that, oh, my mind needs healing, because when my mind is healed, all I'm going to see is that perfect child of God, reflection of the perfect child of God that I am too. So that thought just occurred to me. That's all.
Yes, yes. Indeed, the others are mirrors for how we see ourselves. Okay, so we're going to continue this dive into looking, because it is about an illusory self has temporarily come to occupy our attention in the form of doubting the gifts of God. And this refer you back to chapter 31, self-concept versus self, that introduces this very, very well. And then this is but another attribute of it. David?
The form of the mistake is not important. What is important is only the recognition of a mistake as a mistake. The mistake is always some form of concern with the self to the exclusion of the patient. It is a failure to recognize him as part of the self, and thus represents a confusion in identity. Conflict about what you are has entered your mind, and you have become deceived about yourself. And you are deceived about yourself because you have denied the source of your creation. If you are offering only healing, you cannot doubt. Doubt is the result of conflicting wishes. Be sure of what you want, and doubt becomes impossible.
So it was only today that this statement, doubt is the result of conflicting wishes. Like I could read the words 10 times and it's still, I didn't get it. You know, how's that work? Be sure of what you want and doubt becomes impossible. But then I recall, matter of fact, I was just quoting it, chapter 31, whatever form temptation seems to take, it always reflects a wish to be a self that you are not. It's a wish. Doubt is the result of conflicting wishes. The wish to be something that God did not create you as. It's the wish to be an ego, separate, and have your own agenda and create yourself. So be sure of what you want, and doubt becomes impossible. Another way of saying this is be sure of who you are. Be sure of your identity and your purpose and your function. Be clear on that. And the other attributes follow naturally then from that. So the mistake is always some form of concern or confusion with the self that makes the other person seem like another. Oh, I want to jump ahead here. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So I'm going to come back to this paragraph in just a second. Some of you may be familiar or may have heard of Martin Buber's book, I and Thou. Sometimes translated from the German as I and you. I prefer the translation of I and thou. And it's all about relationships. And briefly stated, a healthy, healed relationship is between a sense of an I and a holy thou, a holy relationship that we honor as a holy thou. But when we lose sight of that, we treat the other person as an it, which is a derogatory term, demeaning, that means they're just something like an object for whatever I want to judge them to be. They're no longer, I've failed to honor their divinity and see them only as a separate self. So Buber said that our own wholeness occurs not in relationship to ourselves, but rather in virtue of an authentic relationship to another human being. And Buber said this, I believe, in the 30s. I can't remember when he was publishing. It was some time ago. But the Course in Miracles emphasizes this very concept. If the teacher of God honors the divinity within the other person and honors the gift of union between one, what we perceive as our own sonship, and the other person, then that's the environment in which healing is. We are certain of the power of healing. But if we lose consciousness and begin to doubt, we see the other person through a different lens of perception, where they become an it, a patient, separate from us, one who's sick and needs, where all kinds of judgments then begin to enter in. And so be clear. So the lesson here that I need to remind myself of is be sure of what you want. And when you do recognize doubt arising in your mind, immediately recognize the mistake and turn to the Holy Spirit for correction. Any comments on that? So this is much more could be said around all what we just read. This is kind of not meant to be a weekend workshop, but a read through. The part I would ask you to ponder on your own is the following. Simple 2 sentences. We're talking about the mistake of seeing another person through some kind of judgmental eyes. And that the form of the mistake is not what matters. It's just the simple recognition of the mistake. So I have someone that wants to come in now at 45 minutes after, who's never been here.
No, don't do it.
Okay. All right. So
Shaking my head too.
right. All right. So we'll pass on that. They'll come in on time. Right. All right. So this line right here, I would encourage you to review and pray on with the Holy Spirit. And the mistake is always a form of concern with the self to the exclusion of the other person. It's a failure to recognize him as a part of the supreme self, the super self. It's a failure to recognize his part in creation as a holy thou, and thus represents a confusion in identity. It's actually a confusion about yourself. Because if you can't see another person as a holy thou, you can't see yourself as a holy thou. So much good there. We're going to go on to the next section unless there's any thoughts or comments you all would like to share. Go ahead, Jane.
Well, I think that the sense of self-doubt comes in when we recognize that we're not the ones that do the healing. And if we don't recognize that, what happens is we become very arrogant. Because the self-doubt comes in that we really are not who we truly are. And that's not true. We are who we truly are. That's all we are. However, in that self-doubt, there can be a leading to understanding certainty and to know what the truth is. So that's a good part of it too, I think, is that you'll never feel, I will never feel good if I think that I healed somebody. Count on that. Because it is not the truth. And we know that if we're not living in the right mind of the truth of the reflection of God, we don't feel good. We don't feel good. I mean, I can't even imagine saying that as somebody that I had looked upon with the Holy Spirit with the maximal love of the Holy Spirit got healed. I can't imagine saying, well, I did it. I mean, that would just be so arrogant, in the whole world. But just like everything else, what we do that is simply a mistake, and not to be chastised or beat up ourselves, it leads us to understanding that no, we're not the healer, and especially if we don't believe in atonement, if we're not representing it through atonement. So again, there's always a purpose for the bad or what seems bad, the self-doubt, because if we stay with that, we'll grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. David, you had a comment?
Yeah, this reading has really, really spoken to me in many ways, and particularly the notion that a healing, to doubt a healing because of the appearance of continuing symptoms is a mistake in the form of lack of trust, and as such is an attack. And I think about, first of all, I think about myself and how I attack myself for having continued symptoms when supposedly I have been in a healing and have turned things over and have asked for help, and those things that I continue to display symptoms of makes me doubt everything as self-doubt, as it says. And then I attack myself, the false self, the illusory self. And I think about when I try to talk to my son about his alcoholism and drug stuff, and I carry the message and I tell him something and I ask for a healing for him, and the symptoms continue, and I bring it up again, it is indeed, as it has been pointed out to me by others, a form of attack. I am attacking him, and therefore I am attacking myself, because whatever I give, I'm giving to myself. And if I doubt myself healing, then I'm doubting the healing in other people as well. And it is a complete downward spiral into level confusion, self-doubt, the ancient prison. And this has really been helpful to me to feel that and experience that, and to try to see it in a different light. Thank you.
Thank you. Joy, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was so enjoying what David was saying and what Jane said, and I just kept hearing, and I don't know anything about the Bible at all, but I kept on hearing, it is not I, but my Father that doeth the work. I'm sure I heard that somewhere. I'm sure I've heard it, along the journey, but that's kind of like what I kept hearing. It is not I, but the Father that doeth the work. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, David, for sharing that, because I mean, as I'm reading this, I'm going into a lot of self-doubt myself. So I just appreciate you sharing that part of the journey too. Thanks.
Susie?
Yeah, and I think it's great for all of us that when we get into that, it's that one sentence. Now I have some clarity around this now. When I get into all of that doubt and judgment, and like Jane said, specifics and all that, I know I haven't accepted the atonement for myself. It's just that simple right that now. And it's just a mistake. And that's what I've gotten from all this. Like, oh, there's the answer. I haven't accepted the atonement for myself. There's my work. Holy Spirit, I've made a mistake. Instead of, going into all that, doubt, beat up mode, stuff like that. It's amazing. Thanks for all the shares.
Thank you. All right. Yes, thank you for that. Moments of deep honesty. We'll go on to the next section here. This is section 8. How can perception of order of difficulties be avoided? See if you can catch the reoccurring themes from what we just did appearing now in this format. David?
How can perception of order of difficulties be avoided? The belief in order of difficulties is the basis for the world's perception. It rests on differences, on uneven background and shifting foreground, on unequal heights and diverse sizes, on varying degrees of darkness and light, and thousands of contrasts in which each thing seen competes with every other in order to be recognized. A larger object overshadows a smaller one. A brighter thing draws the attention from another with less intensity of appeal. And a more threatening idea, or one conceived as more desirable by the world's standards, completely upsets the mental balance. What the body's eyes behold is only conflict. Look not to them for peace and understanding.
It's interesting because this was written in the late 60s, where there was some rudimentary understandings of perception and how the mind works. Now, neuroscientists are very clear that in a field of objects, the mind picks up the thing that moves, that's different than, so from 1 second to the next, all the other objects are still, but the one that's moving keeps changing. And the mind picks up on that. It emphasizes these differences. And they call them spiking neural networks. And they actually build machines, computer chips that are modeled after this. So it focuses on what's different from second to second, or even two objects next to each other. One's pink and the other's yellow, and you notice they're otherwise identical, but you notice the differences in color. So the mind is preoccupied with categorizing things according to those differences. This is fundamental to what perception does. And of course, what we learn is in the Course of Miracles is all those categories that the mind says, this is pink and that one's yellow and that one's small and that one's big. And I like the way that one looks, but I don't like the way the other one looks. All those categories we've made up and are meaningless. They aren't really helpful for the purposes of a healing journey. They just carry you into, as Jane said, all these specifics that add up to nothing. And what it does is preoccupation with those details completely upsets the mental balance. And we will have more to say about a state of mind that the Course calls a mental balance. We'll have more to say on that later, in the textbook, but I want you to recognize the term of mental balance, and maybe you can even pick up yourself for when you are in a state of mental balance. It's a very tranquil state, not rushed with conflict, not feeling overwhelmed, very present in the moment. Most of you would readily recognize the state of mental imbalance, where there's anxiety, you got a narrative about the past, or you're trying to plan the future, the next couple hours of your life, or how do they react to me, and all that upsets the mental balance. The goal of this course is sanity and mental health, which requires a mental balance. And we learn, going back to this paragraph we just read, that the body's eyes behold only conflict. They behold only differences, the ways in which we categorize things that show us my meaningless thoughts show me a meaningless world. Oh, that person wears a coat in the winter, but that person isn't wearing a coat. And that somehow that's important. And so we're going to look at that a little bit more here. It's the very core of how perception operates. You were actually doing it all the time. Let me go one step further. Your brain does it automatically. It's all mammals do this. This is a survival skill. If you don't notice something moving in the forest, it may catch up with you and eat you. So you have to learn biologically to recognize things moving. And notice how the fear goes with that. You recognize things you should be afraid of. And so it's baked into your biological apparatus, but it is not a part of your soul. It is not endemic to your soul's functioning. And so this is what requires that we learn a new method. Okay, so look not to the body's eyes for peace and understanding. What do you look to for peace and understanding? David?
Illusions are always illusions of differences. How could it be otherwise? By definition, an illusion is an attempt to make something real that is regarded as of major importance, but is recognized as being untrue. The mind therefore seeks to make it true out of its intensity of desire to have it for itself. Illusions are travesties of creation, attempts to bring truth to lies. Finding truth unacceptable, the mind revolts against truth and gives itself an illusion of victory. Finding health a burden, it retreats into feverish dreams. And in these dreams, the mind is separate, different from other minds, with different interests of its own, and able to gratify its needs at the expense of others.
Finding mental balance and tranquility and peace of mind unacceptable, the mind then goes out in the quest for something different, something else, to fill itself and occupy itself with illusions, travesties of your own. These are false creations, travesties of the true creation, an attempt to make those fantasies real to our own mind. That's the fundamental process. And we've all participated in this. We've all have done this unconsciously. not realizing, not having the perspective that the Course provides us here. In fact, this, you can see, this can become addictive. All addictions. It's the mind, therefore, seeks to make it true out of an intensity of desire to have it for itself. When you're compulsively addicted to something, you're thinking about it even before you've gotten there. You're planning in advance of how are you going to get your supply, whatever that may be. How do you ensure supply? I'm going on vacation. Well, how am I going to ensure supply when I'm away? So the mind is out of this intense desire to have these things for itself. So this is a real peek under the covers of how the perceptual system works and how the illusions work. Susie?
Yeah, so what really comes up for me is, this is our ego, and this is where we've been comfortable for so long, right? And even though it makes complete unmental balance, so what comes up for me is, learning to be comfortable while I'm uncomfortable, so I like learning to be comfortable being peaceful, because my default comfort, well, I'm just using that word, but we know that's not true because I had such a troubled mind, was to be troubled. And what I want is mental balance and an untroubled mind. And I have to learn, or I've been learning, I will say, to be comfortable without all of that mental chatter and discomfort and stuff that takes me completely out of mental balance. I love this course because it gives me each time mental balance, or going to be my new catchphrase this week, but being comfortable, uncomfortable in the beginning, getting comfortable. So anyway, that's what came up for me.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Thank you. Okay, we'll go on. David?
Where do all these differences come from? Certainly they seem to be in the world outside, yet it is surely the mind that judges what the eyes behold. It is the mind that interprets the eye's messages and gives them meaning. And this meaning does not exist in the world outside at all. What is seen as reality is simply what the mind prefers. Its hierarchy of values is projected outward, and it sends the body's eyes to find it. The body's eyes will never see except through differences. Yet it is not the messages they bring on which perception rests. Yet it is not the messages they bring on which perception rests. Only the mind evaluates their messages, and so only the mind is responsible for seeing. It alone decides whether what is seen is real or illusory, desirable or undesirable, pleasurable or painful.
Mm-hmm. So what's being described here, particularly the concept that each of our minds have created a set of values and put them in a hierarchy of what's worthy and valuable to you and what is not valuable or unworthy of your attention. Philosophers have understood this and written about this. These are relative values, and they vary across cultures and time. Different civilizations have different hierarchies of value. Even here within the same time period, in the same country, in the same culture, people have different hierarchies of values. they are all artificially made up. Many people can't even articulate their values, but yet their mind has decided at some level of unconsciousness of what's worthy and what's unworthy. And so one of the greatest undoings of the Course in Miracles is to undo all that hierarchy, undo all those categories, and simplify it to the categories that the Holy Spirit offers, which are simple and just two categories. Is it love? Is the person asking for love or offering love? Is this an opportunity to offer help or to be helped? The Holy Spirit simplifies all this, so you don't have to depend on your own made up hierarchy of values. You're not forced into that very complex thought system that tries to give a weighting of importance to just about everything. You can just drop all that and say, can I be helpful here? And so that is why the Course is so simple. And it allows one, instead of making all those judgments, to remain in a more tranquil state, well, just accepting things as they are. David?
It is in the sorting out and categorizing activities of the mind that errors in perception enter. And it is here correction must be made. The mind classifies what the body's eyes bring to it according to its preconceived values, judging where each sense datum fits best. What basis could be faultier than this? Unrecognized by itself, it has itself asked to be given what will fit into these categories. And having done so, it concludes that the categories must be true. On this, the judgment of all differences rests, because it is on this that judgments of the world depend. Can this confused and senseless reasoning be depended on for anything?
Yeah, so it says reinforcing cycle. I decide what categories I'm going to use. I then look for them in the world, and having then found them, decide they must have been true. I must have been right. And these categories can be all kinds of motivations. One person might be motivated, but you know all the list of things that people go through. All those specific categories and specific attributes that the Holy Spirit dismisses all of them as being irrelevant to the goal of healing. David?
There can be no order of difficulty in healing merely because all sickness is illusion. Is it harder to dispel the belief of the insane in a larger hallucination as opposed to a smaller one? Will he agree more quickly to the unreality of a louder voice he hears than to that of a softer one? Will he dismiss more easily a whispered demand to kill than a shout? And do the number of pitchforks the devils he sees carrying affect their credibility in his perception? His mind has categorized them all as real, and so they are all real to him. When he realizes they are all illusions, will they disappear? And so it is with healing. The properties of illusions which seem to make them different are really irrelevant, for their properties are as illusory as they are.
So I should have pulled it up earlier, the exact words from the Principle of Miracles, page 1 of the textbook. There are no order of difficulties in miracles. Why? Because the differences in all those situations in themselves are time-space judgments of what's difficult and what's not. They are illusions. There can be no order of difficulty in healing because the sickness itself is an illusion of sickness. It's not an existential divine reality. It's a perhaps appearing on the physical level or the mental level or the emotional level. It's an illusion. It's fundamentally, as David said, it's a level confusion that because someone's emotional state or mental state or physical state is not what we would identify as good, we then judge them as sick. That itself is the illusion. So removal of those judgments cannot be more difficult than the other, because they were all in themselves but illusions of judgment. His mind has categorized them as real. And yes, they do seem real to the one making the judgment. And this is what needs to be undone. When he realizes they are illusions, they disappear. Judgment's gone. And that's how healing works. So I'm assuming we all are familiar with this message and know how these things are operating. Susie?
Well, it goes back to what Julie was saying. She thought she heard me saying Saturday that only truth is true, right? So, and only love is real. So all these things I think are so difficult and insurmountable, to have a change in thought over. None of them are real. They're all illusions, like you're saying. So, and once I don't believe in them anymore, they're gone. Poof, gone. So for me, this was a really hard thing to read. Like when I first started the course, well, of course there's an order of difficulties and miracles, but I know now that that's so silly because illusions just aren't true. And that's really, it's just, so when my thinking changes, it's not more difficult for one thing than another when I'm willing to change my perception.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. One last paragraph here.
The body's eyes will continue to see differences, but the mind that has let itself be healed will no longer acknowledge them. There will be those who seem to be sicker than others, and the body's eyes will report their changed appearances as before. But the healed mind will put them all in one category. They are unreal. This is the gift of its teacher, the understanding that only two categories are meaningful in sorting out the messages the mind receives from what appears to be the outside world. And of these two, but one is real. Just as reality is wholly real, apart from size and shape and time and place, for differences cannot exist within it, so too are illusions without distinctions. The one answer to sickness of any kind is healing. The one answer to all illusions is truth.
So this is interesting because as one proceeds along this journey of letting the Holy Spirit be your guide and do the judging before you, as we relinquish our own self-appointed role as judge and hand it over, what then happens as we go about our life in this world? It's very clear the body's eyes continue to see the differences. It's not like You don't see a red coat as being red. You still see it, but the mind no longer is preoccupied with those differences, no longer applies the hierarchy of values to those situations. And so no judgment is needed regarding there. It just is, but there's no narrative about it. I like it, I don't like it, etc. And this applies also with someone's state of perhaps their body or emotions. Some will seem to be sicker than others, and the body's eyes will report their changed appearances as before. But instead of processing that information according to those judgmental categories that each of us have made up, instead we rely on the Holy Spirit's categorization. This is so freeing, so simplifying. There's just two categories, one of love and the other of a call for love. And it just makes it really easy to rely on those simple categories rather than have to go through all the mental clicks of categorizing and judging and analyzing and then deciding what should I do here. All that's avoided by simply responding to the Holy Spirit's categories. David, I noticed your hand was up before, but with your background today, I can't differentiate that. Did you have a comment?
I did. And this may seem a little off the wall, but there are many teachers of God. And what came to my mind as we were reading this was Jimi Hendrix, who died when he was only 27. But I've seen interviews with him and things, and he was very much a teacher of God, in my opinion. And the song that kept jumping into my mind of his is this love or is it just confusion?
Yeah. Yeah, he had some profound insights for such a young man and being in his position. So we're not going to go any further in the reading today. I'll just want to leave you with this idea that we read earlier, that the body's eyes notices differences and has preconceived categories of what it values and what it doesn't value, what it likes and is attracted to, and what it doesn't like. And that sorting and categorizing activity of the mind that goes on so fast, that's the basis for errors in perception. And if you're willing, you can turn that over to the Holy Spirit so that your eyes will still see color and shape, but no longer use artificial categories of like and dislike, attracted, repulsed, familiar, unfamiliar. Instead, it will use the filter of the Holy Spirit's love for all creation and reach out with the idea of how can I be helpful? And it's really a wonderful, simplifying, and very comforting approach to use. Susie?
I wanted to just share an experience I had this weekend. I think Kathy's on the call and David's on the call. We went to Fort Lauderdale. We raised money and we hired a food truck, and we also made bags of socks and blankets, and we went and we fed 240 well, the correct term is to say unhoused people. And because of the course, you know, I had I don't think I had any judgment. Because of the course, I went up to so many people, asked them their names, you know, tried to converse with them, like, you know, I mean, I had some sadness and I don't know what the word would be, just that they were cold, or it was particularly cold on Christmas Eve day. And, you know, I had some concerns as to where they would sleep and how they lived their daily lives. But I didn't look at any of them as being less than at all. And I guess it's really a great example also of maybe not seeing the results of the healing or praying for them, but just having trust that whatever is supposed to be. And I used that in my mind that day, that I don't know what anything is for. And I don't know why these people are on the streets and I'm not, or I just don't know what anything is for. And I don't know, I can't perceive anybody's best interest or what's right for anybody. And if we cannot help be at the right place at the right time, then that applies to everyone. So it was a beautiful day. It was really, I think, a holy experience. And no, I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. That's like reliving Christmas all over again. Yeah. Thank you. Any other final comments? Joy, thank you for being here. Any thoughts about how things went today, Joy? Is this what you were looking for?
Absolutely. It just feels so good to be home. So many great, like, I can't even put it into words, but just starting to have, you know, have real perception again and coming out of illusion. It just is incredible, because I've been locked up in the land of illusion for a long time now. I didn't realize it. So it feels wonderful to be waking up and seeing again a little bit. I mean, I feel like kind of like a baby in the beginning again. But at least I'm on track, and it just was wonderful. I loved it. And I'll be there Saturday.
Great, great.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Welcome. All right, my friends, Saturday we'll pick up our changes required in the life of God's teachers. We'll find out unless you read ahead. We'll find out on Saturday, and then go on Sunday and Monday. We're moving through this really quickly. Thank you. What a rich way to spend today together. So a warm hug to everybody. Namaste, my friends.
Namaste. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank
Good night.
you, guys.
Joy.